Alright guys, g'day and welcome to Diggo Gaming. It's my new channel, new channel slash rebranded channel. I want to represent the diggers, I suppose, and start doing some more reaction videos and probably some military sort of tactical simulator shooting games with other veterans from around the world. Today, however, we're going to be looking at task and purposes, why Australia chose the F-88 over platforms such as the AR-15. Something I've had a fair bit of sort of experience with. If you like the channel, definitely go check out Task and Purpose. They've got a lot of great videos on military stuff, firearm stuff. So without any further ado, we'll change over here because I've had a fair bit of trouble getting this to work. But let's do it. We'll start off now.
G'day Warriors, let's talk about our mates down under in the Australian Army and their primary weapon system, the Steyr AUG. In this video, we're going to cover how it was invented.
So I'll just give you a quick background. That's actually an EF-88. So I used that one on my second deployment to East Timor. My first deployment we used the original F-88, which was the original handle designed donut sight. The EF-88 was sort of the updated version with the Picatinny rail on top, you can see there. A few other little mounts and stuff you could add to it. Not a bad weapon. I really enjoyed it. But anyway, let's listen to what Chris has to say on Task and Purpose and go from there.
The story behind its adoption, beating out the M16, and we'll find out where the future of this firearm is going. One of its first tests was in Somalia. The Australian Army patrolled the narrow, crowded streets, and the gun was critical in their success there. The Australian Army protected NGOs, and they delivered over 8,000...
So I think this is probably the first time, someone correct me if I'm wrong, that this Steyr AUG, or the Steyr Oz, as we like to call it, was deployed on like a big operation. I didn't go myself. I had mates that went there and they had no issues with the rifle itself, and that was the original one. These guys are not from Somalia. They're later on somewhere, probably Iraq or somewhere like that. But yeah, let's continue on.
1,000 tons of grain to 137 different villages, all while destroying the insurgent presence there.
Alrighty, so we'll just stop there to show you the difference. That one there is the original, original, probably the closest we'll see to original Steyr. So I think these are some officers training.
The firearm will always be a part of history, since it was the first bullpup to be adopted. And
we'll have to pause it there. This is the newest edition, the F90. Obviously Picatinny rails, the suppressor here, stuff that we never had. Can change barrel lengths and stuff. Won't give away too much because Chris is probably going to talk about it. But yeah, let's look.
By a major military. The bullpup concept of putting the firing mechanism and ammo behind the trigger was first invented in 1901 by an English gunsmith named Thorneycroft.
That's pretty cool.
He succeeded in making the gun lighter weight, but the recoil was brutal, so it was never really used in service. 76 years later of perfecting the concept of the bullpup, the Austrians came up with the Steyr AUG and adopted it into their own military.
The Australian Army
There's the F90 again.
Document from 1988, and it outlines the results of their competition between the Steyr AUG and the Colt M16A2.
It states all of the Aussies' official reasons for why they chose the Steyr AUG as their main rifle.
Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and, from experience, explain why we chose, from my opinion, why we chose the Steyr AUG, and I think it's a good chance to see what I believe in and what Chris believes in the documentation he has. From what I understand is we wanted to make a rifle on home turf that we could, manufacture, repair, kit out to all the guys and girls out there and not have to rely on overseas countries to repair and make our rifles, which makes common sense. It's also a very robust firearm, good for outfield. there's probably going to be a few reasons why Special Forces use it compared to conventional forces, but we'll see how that goes, and I'll come back to that at the right time.
You know it's an Australian military document because it literally has a picture of a kangaroo eclipsing 2 swords on
Oh
the
yeah, that's... Yeah.
When I read through the 200-page document, I could clearly hear the Australian Army's love for the Steyr AUG that actually extends all the way to today. The summary says, quote, "The results clearly demonstrated that from an engineering viewpoint, the performance of the Steyr was significantly superior to the Colt M16A2 in most respects, particularly in terms of endurance and adverse conditions. The Steyr AUG..."
100% agree with that, and I think that's why Special Forces probably use the M4. They don't need to be outfield for as long as we do, well, in some circumstances anyway. But for the average, the average Joe infantryman who's going to be out bush for 1 to 3 to 4 months at a time, very robust, very easily cleanable weapon. Really had no issues with it. Trigger was a bit funny, but yeah.
AUG A1 is recommended as the system most closely satisfying the requirements and is considered suitable for introduction into service without modification, end quote. You can see the testers believe the AUG was infallible. Quote from one of the testers, "AUG, more like AUG, yeah." All of the data
I don't think so.
shows the AUG outclasses the M16A2 in every single category from accuracy to reliability. They make it easy to see aside.
So you can definitely agree on the reliability side of things, having used both the AR-15, M4, Block 2 M4 and Steyr. Accuracy-wise, I think I hit out about 400 metres. Had to aim off, obviously, with the Steyr AUG and its donut sight. I can't speak for the M16 variants. M4s were similar, but yeah, M16 you can probably hit a little bit further out, I believe.
Side-by-side pass, fail, rundown. The Steyr passed all of them, while the M16A2 took the struggle bus through the whole competition. I'm not surprised the American Colt M16 failed that one test category titled "Go on a 200-mile walkabout, then successfully chug a 6-pack of Fosters while riding a kangaroo." By all accounts from
Okay, we don't drink Fosters. I think I've had one Foster's can in my life, and I certainly don't ride kangaroos. But that's just Chris's sense of humour. Better clear that one up.
military analysts to soldiers, this weapon system has performed great in the Australian Army. The only real complaint that you ever see is with the gun's tough trigger pull. The original heavy trigger pull was a problem. It was a heavy 9 pounds. If you really want to understand what makes the Steyr special, then you don't really need to look any further than its name. It's a German acronym for...
So I think another point, and apologies for stopping so much, but what makes the new Steyr so good is the modularity. Previously we had to rely on, I think, the HK416 for a DMR role. Now with the F90 style we can change barrels. I think you can even change gas settings for more gas, less gas. Shorter barrels for CQB stuff, which does make it more attractive for Special Forces. However, I don't think they'll ever pick it back up. M4s being sort of somewhat universal for the Special Forces around the world just makes it easier. Interoperability. There we go. Big word. Yeah. Let's keep watching.
Universal Army Rifle. The reason it's called this is because it had this revolutionary feature for its time of being
You can see how easy to clean that is
all in
there.
one. This, I think, was another key reason why it was chosen by the Australian Army. The AUG is considered a modular system, so it could be a submachine gun if you put the 14-inch barrel on, or you could put the heavy barrel configuration on where it had a 24-inch barrel. It's used either as a designated marksman or a light machine gun with a 42-round magazine.
I've had to use it in emergencies as LMG, but yeah, DMR 100%, infantry battle rifle 100%, LMG could do it, but you're probably not going to have the rounds to do something like that.
fires the 5.56 rounds at a muzzle velocity of 970 meters per
fast.
second, which is faster than the M4. It has a rate of fire of between 700 and 850 rounds.
Faster again.
It weighs 7.3 pounds with a 16.5-inch barrel. I also need your help with something here because I'm trying to reconcile this interesting question. If all the data shows that the Steyr AUG Bullpup is way better than the M4, then why do most Special Forces units around the...
Okay, so as mentioned, I think Special Forces units and the units that I worked with, I wasn't a part of any Special Forces units, but I was attached to and worked with them on pre-deployment training. The M4 is good for direct action style stuff, vehicle mounted stuff, CQB stuff, and good to be able to, you know, when you... Special Forces primarily they'll go in and do a job and they'll get back out as soon as possible. Conventional infantry will tend to be out for a lot longer, which is where sort of the skill level required for the Steyr is probably a little bit less, a lot easier to clean and maintain. And I think just, as I said, the interoperability with the M4 with other units around the world just makes sense.
The world use the M4 instead. As with most revolutionary guns of its time, this weapon had some reliability problems when it first went into service, but that was quickly resolved and the gun proved itself formidable in combat during Afghanistan. It's possible, though, that this initial poor launch turned Australian Special Forces off to the weapon.
100%.
There are some nutty theories out there on the internet where a handful of people believe it wasn't chosen for its performance, but because of political factors instead. For instance, Colt said that they wouldn't let the Australian Army have the license to manufacture the M16 in their own country, even though it was very important to the Australians. Steyr, on the other hand, offered to let them make the AUG however they wanted, wherever they wanted. There's an...
I don't think that's not a conspiracy at all. Especially with this AUKUS deal coming up. I mean, we're going to be building our own nuclear submarines. We're going to be making our own firearms, and probably our own tanks in the future. Considering we're a small island, very close to countries that don't particularly fancy us, we need to be able to manufacture firearms, weapons, ammunition, and without any help. I think that's just common sense, really. I think any country would want to do that.
An interesting claim here that after World War II, Australia really wanted to keep the production of their primary weapon made on their home country's soil, like a lot of other countries do today. The idea here is that the Australian Army tipped the scales in favor of the Steyr AUG in this trial competition back in 1988 so that the Steyr would win and they could produce this weapon in-house. But if you look at the document, it basically says that the Steyr AUG blew the M16 away in every category, in various trials and performance tests. The document claims that the AUG barrels will likely survive 20,000 plus rounds, while the M16 will only last 5,000 rounds.
So I reckon probably my lead-up training and my deployment and the training that continued on to East Timor, I would have put probably 20,000 rounds through it. And to be honest, the F88, not the original F88, but the enhanced feature one, I never really had any stoppages. As long as he, you know, did basic weapon maintenance on it, and it was very easy to clean. Quite a good weapon to have in the tropics, you know, the desert. If you watch Garand Thumb's latest video, it's good in the snow. Just a very reliable and robust weapon, I find anyway.
This kind of discrepancy in performance seems strange to me because the test performance doesn't line up with what the US Army test data shows about the M16A2 since then. To me, this is an interesting theory, but it could also just be the case that the Australian Army loved the Steyr AUG. It actually was a lot better than the M16A2, and it's just the cherry on.
So I think, yeah, a lot of Australian soldiers didn't like the Steyr AUG, and they wanted to go back to the SLR. So I think it has more to do with the earlier scenario is we want to produce our own firearms in our own country for our own defense, and it just makes sense.
On top that they could produce this within their own country. The only piece of small evidence that goes against this, though, is that the Australian SF units like the Special Air Service Regiment They all use the M16, the M4, AR platform, or other traditional guns instead of the Bullpup or AUG as their primary weapon. Why is that?
I mean, there was obvious.
I'm not going to chime in here other than to say that what I said before, yeah, interoperability, better for CQB, better for DAs, probably not as good outfield.
Obviously a huge incentive for the Australian Army to keep production in their own country.
It makes them not dependent on outside influence and allows them to create a whole military-industrial complex, which I've heard can be sort of profitable. The Australian Army has ever since then been strongly committed to their small arms.
So these are definitely not Australian soldiers, that's New Zealand camouflage. Worked with them overseas before, and they actually use the same style as we did. I can't remember off the top of my head. If you do know, they've changed to, I think, a C8 or an AR-15 platform. I think it's a C8, for reasons unknown to me. Anyone can put into chat and let me know.
Manufacturing that happens in Lithgow. They've spent over $70 million in equipment and R&D in the past 10 years. Lithgow Arms employs 150 Australians, and the EF-88 weapon that they produce has led to a 95% satisfaction rate in the Australian Army, according to Defense.net. That's an insanely high satisfaction rate.
If you want to buy into those weird internet theories, one possible piece of evidence that it could be right is that there's some parts in the document where testers defend aspects of the AUG.
So that's obviously a Marine with my rifle. Have to tell a funny story. On exercise talisman saber one year, I was killed in action, and a Marine picked up my Steyr and did a full auto burst. And yeah, he just wanted to have a go. So I suppose all's fair.
That are later seen to be negative.
The Australian Army lists the dual SEER 2-stage trigger as a positive, which I find odd because that seems to be the only thing that everyone agrees needed to be changed. That feature where you pulled halfway, it fired semi, and then you pull all.
It's pretty easily stopped though. I mean, it comes down to soldier training. If you're trained in the weapon system, it's not really a big deal. Even the amount of pressure, I think it's a 9-pound trigger. But I agree, it probably is a benefit if you don't want to use it, and most soldiers wouldn't use automatic fire outfield. There's a pretty simple solution. There's an automatic lockout lug that just pops out from the trigger and stops you from pulling that trigger back to automatic. Easily fixed.
All the way and it fires automatic. Quote from the document: it provided with a pull-through trigger system which allows a speedy change from semi-automatic to automatic firing and vice versa, end quote. The only problem with that old trigger design was when soldiers were getting shot at or they were under stress, they were likely to accidentally pull on the trigger hard and possibly accidentally engage the automatic fire. In later versions of the weapon system, they improved on that feature, gave it an ALO, automatic lockout, which stops the trigger from being squeezed and accidentally firing automatic. Ever since its adoption by Austria, it's been a war between the Bullpup and the traditional rifle.
So I know that the FAMAS was always a pretty good rifle. I did message my mate Bootneck Gamer. If you haven't checked out his stuff, go check him out now. He does a lot of reaction videos and was a Royal Marine Commando. I'm not sure how these performed. I never got to use them. I never really heard much about them. The FAMAS I know has been replaced recently, as has the SA-80. And the M4 variants I did use, not to a great extent, but I could see the difference as to why this would be used over this would be used over that. Pretty simple
concept. France and England shortly after that adopted bullpups as their primary rifles. So is it the case that bullpups are ideal for conventional regular infantry forces but not for special forces?
I think so, yes.
The Steyr is a pioneer in optics. It added a 1.5 times optic, which wasn't common at the time, and it gave it a huge advantage over systems that were running with only iron sights. When you look down the scope, you saw a unique looking black circle reticle, which troops nicknamed the Donut of Death, which sounds like something that would fall out of a dusty old 80s MRE. So maybe the idea that they fudge the tests in favor of the Steyr AUG is clickbait bullshit, and the Bullpup in reality is way better than the M16. If you're a fan of the FBTV YouTube channel, the Firearms Blog.
Let's back up a bit there. What happened there? Alright, sorry, I can't help it pick stuff out like this, but
If you're
there's one flash,
fan
there's
of
another flash. Poor old matey here is probably severely, well, dead. And why? Yeah, anyway, let's continue on.
of the FBTV YouTube channel, the Firearms blog, like I am, you've probably already seen their great video on this same topic. Or Forgotten Weapons, they have amazing content on all these weapons. You should check those out, obviously. I'm sure you already have. I believe the Firearms blog were the ones that they first uploaded this version of this document for everyone to be able to read through, so we really appreciate that. One thing is for sure though, that we can all agree on. This is an iconic weapon that has proven itself worthy in combat, and it's loved among infantry around the world. It's used in over 20 countries as their primary weapon, and the Australians have no plans of switching to anything else in the near future, which means we're gonna keep seeing this gun in movies and video games for ages. So please remember to like this video and subscribe. I really appreciate you guys watching. I noticed that like 80% of you are lurking and not subscribed to Task and Purpose yet, so hit that subscribe button. Also, real quick, go over, follow me on Instagram at CappyArmy for behind the scenes updates. I'm your host, Chris Cappy. I'll see all you warriors next week.
Alright guys, as mentioned, go hit up Chris and his Task and Purpose channel. Apologies for the pretty shitty video quality here. Hopefully the content itself outweighs the shittiness. It's my first video back and I had a few issues with the capture software and editing software, so I ended up having to do the whole thing pretty much in one take. So below I'll put my Discord, I'll put Chris's channel, and yeah, if anyone has any more information I'd like to add, just chuck it down below. And yeah, thanks all. There'll be more videos coming in the future. If you do see anyone, hit up my Discord, post what you want to see, and I'll do my best to get it for you. Thanks guys.